you do your
So
Thank you so much for coming. You guys are probably wondering what you guys are doing here on a Saturday morning. So we're going to talk to you guys about mortgages, real estate, what's coming up for 2024. Myself, Carrasco, I'm here with Folu and Yemi, and we're going to talk to you guys about the real estate. Good? The Zoom's good? Perfect. Okay. All right, so myself, I've actually been in the mortgage or the lending industry for coming on 14 years, about 12 years at RBC and 2 years on the broker side. So myself, I'm actually a mortgage agent, and the reason why I came over to the broker side is because I'm able to put together much better solutions than I can at the bank. The bank is a very narrow focus and only puts together deals for specific types of applications. So from here, I can actually source out the better deal for whoever's looking for something, right? So before I go ahead and dive into everything, I'm just going to tell you what we're going to cover off. So we're going to talk to you guys about the down payments, how to put that together, what type of lenders there are available in the market. We're going to talk about some income programs that's available and some strategies for you guys to take away for yourselves. Okay, so as far as the down payment minimums, so there's a couple of things. So it's going to fall into 3 different segments. We're talking about sub 500,000, 500 to $1 million, and then $1 million plus. So with the down payment on 500,000, you need at least 5% based on the purchase price. Anywhere 500,000 to $1 million, we're looking at 5% on the first 500,000, and then 10% on the balance above. So just as an example, if you're looking at a $750,000 home, that's $25K on the first 500,000, and then you would need another $25K for the next 250. So that's brings your total to $750, and in this case, it's a $50,000 down payment. Anything that's going to be $1 million and above is going to require 20%. Now, just keep in mind that there is higher risk to the banks and higher risk to the lenders. There's a lot of regulations put in place, so that's why the 20% came into that for $1 million plus. Okay, so you guys are probably wondering, okay, where can I take my down payment? Where do I get my money from? So there's a couple of things. You can take it up from RSPs as long as you're a first-time home buyer. You have to qualify for that particular program. You can also do get the down payment. Now, get the down payment, where that can come from. You can have that come from your parents, cousins, family, but it's not really the best source. Friends are not necessarily the best source because lenders are not a big fan of money coming from friends. There's the tax-free savings accounts you can leverage. You can also leverage the first home savings account and just any checking savings account balance that you have there. Preferably, if you guys have your money under your mattress, this is not a preferred method of down payment. If you have the money there, we got to figure out a plan. We got to talk about that. What's the best strategy to put that away? Okay. So you guys are probably kind of wondering, how does it work? What kind of lenders are available? What can I do for you? So taking a viewpoint from a high viewpoint on the actual industry and what's available out there, we have 3 different types of lenders. It's going to fall into these 3 categories. We're talking about A bank, right? A B lender and monolines, and I'll explain that in a moment, but they fall under this particular category, and private lenders. Now, you can see from here, we're talking about very restrictive to the least restrictive, and that's how it comes across. So A bank, where I'm coming from, where I used to be at RBC, I actually used to work with Folu many years ago. That's how we met. But from there, it's federally regulated. And why that's important is because it's going to be the most restrictive, it's least flexible. They provide the lowest rates and the fewest programs. You got to consider the A banks as almost like a cookie cutter. If anything falls outside of the lines of that cookie cutter, we have issues. And that's where the banks doesn't necessarily fulfill all types of mortgage applications in the market. When we're looking at B lenders are flexible. They're provincially regulated most of the time. Some of them are federally regulated. But the idea behind it is that they're more flexible. There's different capital backing those B lenders, and they're able to take on more risk. And because there's a little bit more risk, for the interest rates makes it a little bit different. So it is slightly higher than an A bank, right? And there is going to be some fees. Oh, you wanna everything okay on Zoom? Okay, perfect. So the interest rate is going to be slightly higher than A's, and there is going to be fees. However, they can do a lot more for you. A lot of people that fall into the B lenders are going to be business owners. So business owners, because they have a unique type of income that the bank can necessarily take into account every single time, these B lenders are willing to take that risk on, and they're willing to work with you and help you to fulfill that mortgage. And just to give you an idea of when I'm talking about slightly higher interest rates versus the A bank, I'm probably looking at a 5 to maybe a 6 on the higher end for the interest rate, whereas a B lender, we're looking at maybe 7 to 8. It depends on what your credit score is and all that kind of stuff, but not that much of a difference. And when we're talking about fees over here at the lender, we're looking at about, let's say, 2%. So 1% for the lender side and then 1% for broker side. Unfortunately, there's going to be 2%. However, if we don't charge our brokerage fee, we don't get paid, and then the lender has to back up their investors on their end. Lastly is the private lenders. Now, this is not the solution I recommend. This is one of the last things that I will present to a client. And it's only going to be in very unique situations that I think it's going to be able to fulfill a particular need. So if you have, let's just say a very short term, let's say you only need money for 3 months because you expect some money to come back in, and that is an urgent need. Something like this is going to be a good solution for you. And they are provincially regulated. They're backed by private investors, so you can actually put your money towards either a MIC, or you can actually lend out your money to an individual, and you get a deal brokered that way. It's kind of like an investment, but you're dealing with individuals rather than a bank or a financial institution in that way. They are going to be the highest rates. They are going to be the highest fees. I'll probably say as far as the rates, you're starting out maybe 9.99, and you're going to be moving up all the way to maybe 20%. Fees, you're probably looking at the bottom end, 2%, all the way to 4%, 5%. It just depends on the situation, but this is not my go-to. These two are my go-to. So I'll show you a calculation just to see what it actually looks like when you apply this to applying for a mortgage. So when we're talking about an A bank with $150,000 on the household income and a down payment of $180,000, the max that this particular household can do would be a $720,000 mortgage amount and a $900,000 purchase. And as you can see, it's very restrictive because once we move over here to the B lender, a very similar situation, 150K income, same apples to apples, slightly higher down payments. The only reason why we went for a higher down payment is just to show you how much power this can provide to you. So $880,000 mortgage, that's almost $100,000 more. And then we're looking at a 1.1 purchase price. So a $200,000 difference. Now you can see how much more power that the B lender provides to you when it comes to purchasing a home. So if you're telling me, oh, I want to buy my dream home, it's just outside my budget, maybe we can fit you in with the B lender. Yes, it is more expensive. However, what's the trade-off here, right? We have to weigh out those pros and cons here. Lastly, private. This is where almost no rules exist. There are rules, I promise, but it's like the Wild Wild West. So 150,000 income, same situation, 240K down payment. You're looking at closer to $1 million mortgage, and you can stretch your purchase price out to 1.2. But once again, not a fan of this one. I'm more situated in the A and B and privates to provide you with a more urgent need. Okay. So how do these income programs work? How can we leverage these? There's a couple of things that we can leverage. Big thing is rental income. Rental income is a great thing. I'm going to show you a calculation. It'll make sense, and you're going to love it as to what we can do for you. Business owners. Now, at the A banks, we're probably going to fall under the business gross up. So there is certain things that we can add to income when we apply at an A bank. However, once again, very restrictive. There's maybe only 2 or 3 programs that can really apply to business owners. When we talk about B lenders, they're going to have a stated income program. There's 2 main categories that it falls under, which I'll explain to you in the next slide. Okay. So with these business owner programs, the A banks are going to fall under these business financials. So typically, we're going to need the last 2 years financials, and you cannot have a negative income on any of those 2 years. So I can do my gross up. But I would say the banks are going to probably fall into 40% gross up. Maybe I can take you to 400%. It depends on the industry. It depends on what's showing up. We'd have to take a look at those financials so I can tell you what we can do and what we can't do. For business owners, there is under the B lender program, we're talking about the stated income. So the stated income is going to be where we use either the last 12 months, I take all the deposits, and I take a look at some of the expenses, and from there, I'm going to present that case. This is the income. We don't need to use your T1 generals, and we're not looking at your financial statements. So this is a great program for business owners. Let's just say the last 12 months, you have taken your company from a 200,000 to a 400,000. This is going to be very powerful because when we go to the banks, we're looking backwards. And over here, yes, we're looking at the last 12 months, but we're not looking at maybe up to a year or two because of the financials. Stated income, we do have a stated income program with one of the lenders. And what you do is you go to the lawyer, you provide your information, you say you make this much, you have this much in expenses, you sign the document, and that's it. No more documents around the income for that particular individual. So that's another really powerful program. All right, so how do we leverage this? How do we use what I just told you? So coming back to the rental income, in a situation where we don't have rental income and you're applying 150K, so and I'll show you the rental income scenario, and the down payment for 230. So apples to apples, exact same situation, but in this, we have a $2,000 per month rental. And what that actually provides you as far as a difference is $200,000 on the mortgage amounts and about $200,000 worth of the purchase price. And this particular individual, let's just say, depending on the size of the mortgage and what they're doing, you may be talking about a $3,000 net payment out of your own pocket instead of about $5,000. So that's just to give you an idea. All right. So you guys are probably wondering, how do I choose my rate? Great. We have a great way to start to purchase a place. How are we going to actually choose? So there are something fluctuating rates or floating rates. We can talk about fixed term, short or long. So the floating rate is going to be changing depending on how prime moves. And the banks and the government essentially decide prime. As far as the fixed terms, those are going to be good options. It just depends on what's going on with you. Do you have a business? Is your business increasing in income year over year? Or are you a retired individual with a pension? Because if you have a fixed income, why are we going to go for a floating rate? You don't want to have a changing payment over the course of 5 years. You want to know for 5 years you got the same payment. Yes, you're trading off on maybe a lower rate, but at the same time, you know exactly what's going to happen. So that's, we'll do consultation if you want to get more information on that, because I like to tailor it to the individual. But that's just the kind of overview of that one. So we're going to talk about the first-time home buyer rates. Now, this is going to be really great because this is where we can get you the nice low rates. Does anybody know what default insured is? No? Okay, all right. So default insured is when you have less than 20% down payment. What that really means is that you didn't put enough, essentially you didn't meet that requirement at 20%. So now the banks require insurance. And this insurance is in order to protect them against any losses, and the premium is added to the mortgage. In the case of, because there's going to be that default insurance, there is less risk involved to the bank, and because of that, they're going to provide you the discount on the rate. So for example, if we're going for TD at the default insured, we're looking at a 5.29. Now, when you're going to purchase, the qualifying rate that me and the banks have to use as a calculation to determine how much mortgage you can afford, we have to do the calculation of 7.29. So that is a little bit of a barrier, but there is other products available in the market to get you through that door. What I can do is with Marathon Mortgages, they actually decided, let's put together 6 months rates just so that we can lower the barrier. And they're providing a 6 months rate at 4.49. And you're thinking probably, wow, what's the strings? What's the catch over here? Actually, the catches on this one is very minimal. And the reason why I say it's minimal is because in that first 6 months, if you take that mortgage away, you pay it off in cash because you won the lottery, whatever be the case, they are going to have certain clawbacks with the interest that penalties that you pay. However, if you're going to stay in that home, what does that matter to you, right? And you're probably thinking, okay, well, after that 4.49, I'm going to get a gouge with a high rate. You actually are not. And the reason why I mention that is because right now they're offering a 5.19 of renewal. And if we compare 5.19 to 5.29, that's pretty competitive. So you're going to get a regular rate, a regular bank rate once that mortgage comes for renewal. But this eliminates or reduces the barrier from you entering into that first door, right? So that's also another thing to consider. Okay. So just a couple of quick notes to leave everybody off with. Pre-approvals. Is this something that I need to do or not? So pre-approvals to the banks, right, and to the lenders, they require the resources to do so because there is an actual cost that the bank has to put together for this document being issued and for them to review your application. Can I do a calculation to tell you how much you can afford more or less and how much you're going to get approved for? Absolutely. I can always put together a letter for you. It's going to be very similar to a pre-approval, but the pre-approval is all it really is just holding a rate for you. That's what it really comes down to because the banks don't take the time to review your application in full. If I think that you're going to navigate a specialty program, let's just say you're a business owner and you're going to be doing your first purchase, you want to make sure that you're doing it correctly. I'm going to suggest to you put a conditional finance because the bank's not going to navigate a specialty program for you on a pre-approval. So I'm going to say when you make your offer, talk to Folu and make sure that you put a conditional on financing because you want to make sure you meet that requirement first before you proceed. Okay, so pre-approvals, yes, no, depends on your situation. I can help you navigate that, but that's my take on it. So rates from others. You're probably going to go to Google and you say, Chris, I saw you have 4.49, but guess what? I found a 3%. All right, great. If you look into those particular interest rates and if you find something that looks too good to be true, chances are it is too good to be true. A lot of these times, and to me, my take on this is that it is a little bit of a bait and switch. So they're going to talk to you about really low rates, and then when it comes to you actually putting an offer on a place, and when you go to purchase, you're going to find that this particular interest rate disappears like a snowflake. When it's on a hot summer day, it just melts and it's gone, right? But the whole idea is that you want to go through the fine print. You want to make sure if these individuals are going to provide you a really low rate, what does it come with? What is the strings attached? So like I said, it's a little bit of a bait and switch. I'm not a fan of those really low rates. So that's just my take on it here. All right. So anybody know Bruce Lee? I'm sure he's famous. I like this quote: "A wise man can learn more from a foolish question than a fool can learn from a wise answer." So I want to open it up to you guys. I want to answer some questions. You guys have anything that you want to ask?
Go back to the first slide.
The first slide? Yeah, for sure. Let's see here. You're talking about
The down payment.
down payments? Yeah.
What's the reason it's
They put it in regulations. So a lot of this stemmed from the housing crisis or the mortgage crisis in the U.S. and it affected the Canadian market to a certain extent. So what happened is that they put in regulations. They wanted to be able to structure it in a way where they reduce their risk because previously you can go for a longer amortization. It was normal for the A banks to take things at 40-year amortization. So they reduced the risk. They brought it to 30. But that was regulation brought in a long time ago. But they brought in these a little bit more fresh. And when I'm saying fresh, this is probably say 10 years ago, right? Where they structured it in a way to reduce the risk. They want to make sure if you're going to put your money towards a mortgage, that you were able to save up some of your own money to be able to purchase a place. They want to provide it to individuals who are a little bit more financially savvy, and that's why they put this particular structure in place. And that's why when you see $1 million is going to require 20% down payment because that's a higher risk end of things. They don't want individuals to come in at 5% down payments. Yeah.
You use the word MIC. What is a MIC?
MIC. So a MIC is where they pool money from a pool of investors. So you'll actually notice there's if you look it up, you can actually put your money into their pool of investments. And what they do is that when they find an investment appropriate for you, then they're gonna let you know. But sometimes they can do something like a syndicated mortgage where they pull in several investors. Because let's say there's a $500,000 need, you have 100,000, another individual has 400,000, you combine that for 500,000. But these are it's a group where they pool all the money and then they provide you the investments. Rather than if you do, let's say, an individual investment, let's just say you have $1 million to put towards something and somebody needs $1 million, then you don't have to go through a MIC. The MIC, what it does is it provides less risk to you as an investor. It provides a little bit more stability when you're borrowing from that particular MIC, because if you go to private individual, they can kind of list their own conditions. They get their deal brokered. So that's the difference there.
And then you said that private lenders can be federally or provincially regulated, right?
So privates are all provincial.
So
Yeah.
in that scenario, how would I find a private lender? Like, is that a Google search? Like, how would I know that I'm top or?
So it's very the market's very segmented, right? So I can drive down the street and I'll talk to the accountant and they'll say, I know this private lender. So that's they're going to provide on their particular terms. And just to give you an idea, so let's just say I find a private lender. A lot of those private lenders, let's say they have a pool of investors, and when I say pool of investors, they have contacts. So they're picking up the phone and they're saying, okay, well, I got this mortgage. Do you want to provide your money down, right? But what happens is because it's so segmented, you can even reach out and talk to a lawyer and say, I want to lend my money out. I want to provide a private mortgage. Because it's so segmented, you find it everywhere. Where MICs are a little bit more central, you could probably find a list, but that list can actually be even longer than what's available, that which you can find online. So that's an idea of what's going on. I honestly, I have talked to a lot of private lenders, and I'm sure there's plenty more that I want to learn to get to know, because they provide sometimes favorable terms for my clients, but it's just there's so many people to call that you can't find them. That's the whole idea. Yeah. Of course.
So I'm not quite sure what's the difference between purchase price and mortgage.
Yeah, so the purchase price is basically, it's going to come down to the difference. Let me pull it up over here. So this is going to come down between, if you're going to be putting a down payment of 180,000, so the difference between your mortgage and the purchase price would be 180K. Yes. Yeah.
So your mortgage amount is the amount you're going to pay in installments, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
The next, like the 6 months insurance amount?
Yes. The insured mortgages.
Yeah, insured.
Yes.
So about the sorry, just before that, like the rates, the TD rate. So that's like that's TD specific rate and not the prime rates, right?
Yeah, so this is a TD rate. So with these rates over here, for example, a TD is, they post something online, so this would be the posted rate, what you would get going into it. But a lot of the times I can help you to negotiate something a little bit lower. But the problem with the default insured rates is that they're already so low, so for you to get a little bit better, maybe TD will provide an exception on the interest rate, 5.09, maybe 4.99, but it's something that I have to request and they have to approve, because they got to go to pricing and they have to see, okay, do we still have enough profitability providing this mortgage? Because they have things to do on their back end to price it out.
Will this be dependent on your down payments, the amount you have in down payments?
Yeah, so this one, let's say the TD 5.29 default insured, it means that you're putting less than 20% down payment. Yeah, so that's when you fall into this category. And the same with marathon mortgages. So essentially, they're putting this out, this 4.49, to reduce that barrier. That means you can afford much more of a mortgage if you don't have your strongest down payment, but this gets you through the door, because I'm qualifying. We're doing a calculation on 6.49 instead of 7.29.
Okay, so in a case where I want to purchase like a 750 home, right?
Yeah.
Based on the rates, like the down payment is supposed to be based on the calculation.
Yeah.
I have say 65K to put down. Will that kind of like get me a more favorable rates?
It would get you a favorable rate. I mean, it depends on whether we take this course or this course. I provide you the options and then you select from there. It's going to be something where you decide. Because some people will tell me, I don't know who Marathon Mortgage is. I don't want a mortgage from them. And I'll say, okay, fine. Let's go with TD. And then you have to be comfortable what you take at the end of the day. But when it comes to the down payment, you also have to factor in. You have to have money for closing costs. You have to pay the taxes. So there's some other things to consider. So if you have a total, let's say $70K, you might want to be able to reserve some of that money. Maybe you have 20% sitting in your account, but maybe you reduce that because you want to do renovations. Maybe you want to be able to take care of your taxes because you don't want to pull the money from anywhere else. So all of a sudden, that 20% you thought you had, once you take that away, maybe you fall into the default insured rates segment. Any other questions?
The slide before, you were talking about renting. Right?
Yeah.
So say I have 5 friends.
Yes.
And we all look at a spot that has multiple units.
Yeah.
How would that work if we're looking at one, we're going to be living in that space, but essentially we're saying we're renting that space, so one person takes on the responsibility.
So you're saying that one person's taking on as a renter, or
one person takes on the purchase?
Yes.
But they're going to be renting out
to their friends? It doesn't. When it comes to an application, we're going to do market rents, and that's how we're going to help you to qualify. So let's say if we do an assessment on the property and appraisal, which is going to be required, and if they find that basement is going to generate $5,000 per month, that $5,000 is going to be added to help you qualify on the application. Now, it's on you afterwards for you to determine how you're going to lease out the place afterwards. So all it really is it's just going to be there to add to the income, and as long as you qualify, you qualify. And changing up the strategies. Let's just say you're going to tell the lender, I'm going to move into the basement, now I'm going to rent the upper, because now maybe it's $3,500 that you're getting per month. That's another tactic we can use, but not all lenders are going to be favorable to that. They might end up saying no because there's just considered too much risk. However, I would say if we're taking about a year ago, they would be entertaining that. It just depends on the situation, and then it's one of those things where I have to consult, and then let's look at the property, let's look at the appraisal, and then see what we can and can't do. And it also depends. If you're going to go to an A bank, Scotia Bank, they're not going to accept an upper rental. They're just going to be like, no. If you're moving up from a particular property, you're going to upgrade. That's what we expect. They're going to block it. If we have a B lender, maybe there's some wiggle room. Maybe there's a way for us to talk ourselves into something like that. But it's just going to be dependent on that appraisal.
But in that situation, it changes the amount potentially of the purchase price.
It just depends. It just changes what the mortgage amount, because you're going to make your offer. At that point we're navigating potentially specialty program. If we take it to, let's create the scenario of a Scotia Bank. We have a pretty solid idea what a basement will rent for. It's typically in and around $2,000. So I know when I put the application together, $2,000 is what is going to be put into the application. Now, if the appraisal comes back short, let's say $1,800, $1,900, it doesn't affect the mortgage amount too much, where it's going to make the deal fall apart, right? If it comes in a little bit higher, it helps us. Then that way you can actually reduce your down payment a little bit and maybe get a higher mortgage. But once again, it depends. You have extra capital put down. That's an individual scenario. Yeah. Any other questions?
Sorry.
Yeah. No. Go ahead.
So you spoke about having to closing fees, taxes, and so on.
Yeah.
And a case where I'm bringing the down payment for my first time to buy a savings account.
Yeah.
Would that be different tax or the same tax? Same tax applied?
So it's so the closing costs you're looking at, and it depends on which municipality you go for. But let's say, for example, Toronto, you're going to pay double what you're going to be paying in Mississauga as far as the land transfer tax. So that's one piece. And then you're gonna have the legal costs, so you're gonna be, paying the lawyer, and they're gonna help you to set up everything on title and do the title insurance and all that wonderful stuff. So maybe for the legal, you're estimating maybe about 2,500, and then depending on the actual purchase price, that's where you're looking at the land transfer tax. But those are gonna be the bulk of your closing costs. Yes. Any other questions? Yeah.
Silly question. What do you think of these interest rates and where it's headed?
So that's a lot of clients are gearing themselves towards a 3-year, and the reason why the 3 years is because the projections are saying yes, interest rates are coming back down. When that's actually going to be fulfilled, we don't know. There's a lot of uncertainty in the market, and I like to say that I'm not paid to predict the interest rate. However, I'm here to be able to help select a term. And as far as that goes, yes, it is expected and projected to go down. How quickly that happens, we don't know. But the 3 years provides such a low rate that it's a trade-off. By the time you come up from that 3-year renewal, the interest rates should be down, based on what we know now today. So that's a nice balance. The 1 and the 2 year, the interest rates are not that great. And I think what is happening is that the banks know that the interest rates are coming down, and they want to maintain that profitability as long as they can. So that's why the 1 and the 2 years are going to be a little bit higher, and then the 3 years is where we find a better bargain. So when we're talking about the whole market, people are gravitating towards that 3 year just because it looks a lot nicer. But who knows? Maybe by the end of this year we see a 1% drop, and what does that actually mean on an interest rate? Maybe you're looking at about the 4s, but maybe you want to take that 3 years, because by the time the 3 years plays out, maybe the interest rates are coming down to 3%. It's a little bit of a gamble, and it also, once again, if you're a fixed income, I'm going to always recommend you go for 5 years. You don't want to see that change of payments that frequent, but if you're telling me, hey, I still want that 3 years, and by all means, I'll help you set that up, but you want to consider what's also happening on the income side. Yeah. Any other questions? All right. Great, perfect. So that wraps it up for me. I'll let Folu take over here.
All right, thank you very much, Chris. A lot of great information that was provided on the mortgage side of things. All right, my name is Folu Akindunni. I am a real estate agent in the Greater Toronto area, and I specialize in residential resale as well as pre-construction, and also helping clients to build generational wealth using real estate as a tool. Now, I just want to ask a quick question, because I know a lot of people, maybe some of you have been having conversations with friends and family on what's happening in the market, what's happening on the real estate side, or whether everything's going to come crashing down. Anybody having those conversations, or you're? Well, that's fair. That's fair enough. That's fair enough, because a lot of things that people have been talking about is, are we even in a recession, right? There is a technical definition for what a recession is, and that's generally when you have 2 consecutive quarters of negative gross domestic product, or GDP growth, in the economy. Canada has seen slight growth in their GDP, so technically we're not in a recession. However, anything can happen, right? So just going with that, a lot of things that we've been seeing as well is, real estate is still in demand. We have very strong population growth, very strong immigration, and we also see rentals that are almost like getting out of hand. I did talk about strong immigration growth. Just 2022 alone, we saw a little over 1 million people come into the country. And then the first 9 months of 2023, we had about 1,030,000 people come into the country. Of that number, about 465,000 were permanent residents. and the remainder was non-permanent residents. And the government has a goal to increase the permanent residency of 485,000 coming this year, and increasing that goal to 500,000, and then in 2025 as well as 2026. So what's that really doing for the market? Because we did see unprecedented rate hikes, 10 of them in just from March of 2022 all the way to July. Even with those interest rates, we see here, because this graph is the average resale price for 2023. And the gray bar is what prices did compared to the previous 3 years. So even with the rate increases, we still saw in June and July that prices were a little bit increased over the past 3 years. So the reason why that's happened is because of our immigration into the economy, and the lack of supply to accommodate the people who are coming in. So we see a gap that keeps happening in terms of what population growth and what supply really is. So in my opinion, real estate will continue to be a safe asset. And in the future, it's really going to be very important for your family and yourselves in terms of financial stability, because salaries alone just won't cut it, just based on what we have in terms of people coming in and not being able to keep up with the supply. So until they come up with a solution with that, we will continue to see prices continue to either stay consistent, going up a little bit, or over time, real estate is always a great asset because it does appreciate over time. So with all of that, you may be asking yourself, well, how do I get in if I don't have a property, or how do I add an extra property to what I already have in this current climate? There are a few ways. Does anybody know what a real estate investment trust is, or heard of it? Yeah. Okay. So what that is, a real estate investment trust is it's a good way to partake in the real estate space. So what that is you have companies that own or control properties, from residential buildings, commercial, industrial, and the likes. So what they do is they operate this and they rent it out. And when they collect the rent, they will pay you a dividend based on your share of purchasing their stock. You won't have any ownership of the properties. However, you will be receiving dividends. Rent-to-own programs are also another great way, joint ventures and pre-construction. I'll go through this in the next few slides. Now, with a rent-to-own option, those are more popular in climates such as this, when there's a little bit of uncertainty in the market, or prices are elevated, or we're currently in a high rate climate that we're currently in. And the reason why it's a good option is because whether you're unable to get a mortgage right away, or you don't have the down payment, or maybe your credit is not the greatest, you can always sign up to a rent-to-own program where you're able to rent, and then with the hopes of transition into ownership. And that can be anywhere from 1 to 3 years. So the way the program would work, you would negotiate what the future price is, because your intention is to own the property once you move in. So before you sign the agreement, you will have a discussion and negotiation with the seller as to what that future price is that you're going to be buying the property. And then once that's established, you will need to pay a non-refundable deposit on that home. Usually it's anywhere from 1% to 5% of the value. And then your rent that you're paying every single month, a portion of it is accumulated as credit towards your down payment when you're ready to purchase the property. Now, let's say you sign a 3-year agreement, you're paying rents, a portion of that gets into a separate account where it will be accumulating, where you can use for down payment. Once your lease is completed, you now go to the to get a mortgage, get qualified for a mortgage, and you have access to the deposits that you've already put down and you've already accumulated. Now, if you decide not to move forward with the purchase, the deposits that you've put down before, you lose those. So that's why there are 2 options when it comes to a rent to own. You have a lease option, which is more flexible, and you have a lease purchase, which is binding. So you're obligated to purchase the property. With the lease option, if you are in one of those, and for whatever reason you do not move forward with purchasing the property, you lose your deposits that you've already made, but there's no other penalties, so you're able to walk away from it. With the lease option, you lose your deposits, and you're also facing possible legal actions as well as penalties because you're obligated to purchase that property. Joint venture is a great way to get into the market if you want to get in and want to partake, because you're essentially partnering with, and you should partner with someone that you trust and your goals align with each other in terms of getting into the market. A lot of people have an emotion. It's emotional, which is understandable. When they want to get in, they want to get into the dream home, right? Which is understandable. So that kind of holds them back from getting into the market because there's nothing wrong with getting into whatever you qualify for. So whether it's a studio, a junior 1-bedroom, a stacked townhouse, you can always get into one of those and using a joint venture model. So for example, let's say your property is $500,000 and it requires a 20% down payment. That's $100,000, which is of course not a small amount. But let's say you get 3 other friends that also want to get into the market. That brings $100,000 to $25,000 that each person needs to bring. So it makes it a little bit more accessible to be able to get into the market and hold it and let the property do all the work for it in terms of appreciation. Because by the time you maybe sell, you may have built equity in it where you can refinance, pull some equity out, or you can sell, take those funds and upsize into something else, right? So joint ventures are a great model to use. And pre-construction I love pre-construction. I don't know if it's because that's how I started in getting into homeownership, but it's a great way to get into the market. So what a pre-construction is essentially you're buying a house or a condo before it's finished. You sign the agreement with the developer, and you don't need to, because the property is not fully constructed, you don't need to bring all the funds up front. You generally need 20% of the purchase price, but you don't need to bring the deposit all at once. You're able to make the payments over time. So it allows you to also save while you meet those payment thresholds. Typically, when you sign an agreement to buy a pre-construction property, you will need to put anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 when you sign the agreement. And within 30 to 60 days, you will be required to bring 5%, and the balance of the 15%, depending on the location, the developer could take anywhere from 1 year to 2 years. So it still gives you time to be able to save up and meet those payment thresholds. Now, before even getting into pre-construction, fundamentals is very key, because fundamentals will allow you to mitigate your risk so that once your property is completed, and depending on the size of the project, if pre-construction can take anywhere from 2 years to 6 years, depending on the size of the project. So fundamentals will allow you to mitigate your risk so that once you get your keys, you're not upside down in terms of equity. You know, you don't owe more than what the value is. Using this climate as an example, I'm sure you guys have probably seen on the news some individuals that have bought homes. I think there was one in Brampton where they have bought homes, prices started going up. What they owe is now more is more than what the value of the properties are. So when you follow fundamentals, you will be able to mitigate a lot of the risk. And what exactly is that fundamentals? Access to transit, because whether you're using it for yourself or maybe you're going to be renting it out, you're going to need transit. Institutions in the proximity, so this would be universities, colleges, what kind of amenities are in the area? Parks, are there parks? Are there maybe private schools, schools for maybe you have young children, what kind of schools are in the area? It could be big box stores, Walmart, Costco, Home Depot. For this, I like to see if there's a Starbucks, to tell you the truth, in the area. And the reason why is because whenever there's a Starbucks in the area, the place is on the come up, right? And then they also have a lot of resources to do research and due diligence in a specific area before they build their brick and mortar. What sort of private and public investments are going in? So this could be maybe like a revitalization of a waterfront, or maybe they're having more infrastructure in terms of roads. Maybe you have Fortune 500 companies coming in to build their head offices. That means more people will be coming in, more jobs will be created. Are there hospitals in the area, right? Vacancy rates. Vacancy is the percentage of how much homes are left empty. Okay, so vacancy rates, are they low? When they're low, that means that everything on the rental market is being rented. If they're high, it means nobody is going there to rent, right? And if you're looking for yourself or even for investment, that's usually not a very good thing. Our rents increasing. That's also a good sign that the area is bustling and being vibrant. And population growth. Are more people coming in? Is it young families, or is it retirees? If it's retirees, it might not be the best place to go in, depending on where you want to stage in life, right? Because if it's, let's say, for yourself, because retirees are not really able to get a lot of property taxes for infrastructure and things like that, because usually they don't have access to a lot of disposable income, right? And then diverse economic base. What that means is how many industries are within that area that you're going to be invested in? Is it one big car plant, let's say, for example, where 60 or 70% of the workforce works at this particular plant? If that plant closes down and they leave, that means that 67% of that area just went out of work. And if you have property there, you're investing there, you're not going to be getting your rent, right? So that's what diverse economic base means. Now, with this, using this, you can take this fundamentals and take it anywhere. As long as they check off the list, whether you're buying it for yourself or as an investment, you will do well, because everybody needs these access to these things. Now, there's a strategy when it comes to pre-construction. I'll use an example. Let's say you guys are a developer, or let's say I'm a developer, and I want to develop something like this, a multi-unit condo. The first people I'm going to tell about, because I'm excited about this, are going to be people closest to me, right? My friends and family, and because I want to see them win. So obviously, I'm going to provide them a certain preferred rate, right, that nobody else will ever see. So maybe, of course, I can't sell my entire project at this price. So maybe I'll allocate maybe 10 units, 20 units, depending on the size of it. to my friends and family at a certain preferred rate that nobody else would ever see. So this is what happens. This is where you want to be when it comes to reconstruction, where you have access, where you have relationships, right? Or you know someone that has relationships. So after the friends and family, as a developer, the next people that I'll go to are my close associates. So people in the industry that I know maybe sell well, and I want to essentially give them access to what I'm going to be building. So I would have increased the price maybe by another 5-10%, right? And sell it and provide it to them for them to sell to their networks, right? And then moving on, I keep as it goes through the processes, I still have to go to the city to maybe I need to rezone the property. Maybe it was farmland before, and I want to change it so that the city will allow me to build a multi-residential in the area. So this entire process and fees that developers need to pay to do this. Master plan is if there's a large area, you want to build a lot of mixed uses in the area, and also a site plan. So once it's ready and it has its stamp of approval from the city, it increases the value of the land, which means I can now increase my price even more, even further, right? And then once I have maybe 70 to 80% of my sales, I can now bring in the tradespeople, start breaking ground, and start building. While this is building, I still have some inventory, so I'll still sell. This is where now I'll launch it to the public because I've already gotten the funding from the bank to finance my project. So I'll launch it to the public, but I've also increased the price. Now, where this becomes very powerful is the people who were here, as they started, buying, as they were buying, and the price kept on going up. I know if I bought there that I've already made money in the beginning, right? Because whatever they sold for after is now the market rent. So once it gets completed, it now goes onto the resale market, and people who bought in this area would essentially obviously want to make some money. So use an example. Let's say it's now worth $700,000, and people have bought here. They'll want to sell at $750, and let's say when I was over here, I bought for $500. So it doesn't really matter what they do because I know they'll continue to push the price for them. So I've mitigated my risks enough for me to know that if something were to happen in the economy, I won't be losing any money or be in any type of distress because there are individuals who are here that need to basically either break even or make more. So it helps me on if I want to sell my property or if I want to rent it out. Now, also identifying who you want to buy from. You want to make sure that they're good, reputable developer builders. Who are their partners? Partners meaning who is backing them up financially. Because I want to make sure that my projects that I'm going to be buying, since I'm only buying a contract, I want to make sure that it gets completed. So, do they have financial companies that are backing them up, and who are those people? Or are they financing the entire project themselves? Because when it gets into development, it's very capital intensive. So I want to make sure that they're well capitalized and they have enough funds for them to be able to finish the project. And then I want to know if they have a good track record of delivering projects, or are they canceling projects, or are they going bankrupt and coming back as a new company, right? So I can stay away. So these are the things that I want to know about the people that I want to buy from. And then once I have all that information, I want to ensure that I have, before I sign an agreement, I want to make sure that I have certain things in place in my agreement. So there are developers do get charged taxes and levies from the city. So the city will charge them taxes for infrastructure, because of new roads or maybe or parks. And these charges can run into 100,000 plus. So you want to make what developers do with that, they'll pass it on to the end users, obviously, right? So you want to ensure that you have those capped so that when you now close, you're not stuck with a bill for all the development charges that they would charge for. Assignment clause, what that means is it allows you, before the project is completed or your unit is ready to be taken over, it allows you to be able to sell your contract to somebody else. Life happens, maybe something happened financially or within the family, and you no longer can close on this project. You want to have an assignment clause that will allow you to sell your contract to somebody else, and they have to close on it. And then you also have a right to lease. What that means is if something changes in your work situation and you need to get relocated, or you still want to keep the property, the right to lease will allow you to rent it out, make some income while you are in another city or maybe another country. I'm just going to pause here and see if anybody has any questions. Any questions about what we talked about there?
Yeah. For the rent to own,
Yes.
what's the typical or average down payment that you have?
Okay. So this will be negotiated with with the seller, and depending on the property, just as how you would essentially be going through the process of like resale. So just like how Chris had mentioned, depending on where you are, or the first $5,000, the first $500,000 would require 5% down, and anything over that, 10% down. So that's how the down payment would work. And the credits that you're getting from your rent is essential to help you build that down payment. So hopefully by the time the 3 years, because these are things that you need to calculate, because you would already have the purchase price from the beginning before you sign the contract. So you would know how much down payment you need to pay, and you also pay a deposit as well. So that deposit can range anywhere from 1% to 5%. So that's also being added to the accumulation, right? That goes towards your down payment. So these are calculations that needs to be done before you sign the agreement, because this is just a plan that's put in place so that once you get to your end of the lease, everything's already ready to go. I have what my down payment is that was accumulated. I have my purchase price. I talked to Chris. Chris, get me that mortgage. Here's my down payment because this is where it came from. Right? Yes.
Follow up to that. What happens if you sign the lease to own agreement and the 3 years have passed, but due to market changes, the price has either increased for that the value of that property is either increased or decreased? Is there a market adjustment at the end of the 3 years?
That's a great question. So that is all negotiated between you and the seller, because obviously if the value goes up, that's a bonus for you.
Right, because I'll be holding true at that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why you want to negotiate the price in the beginning, right? With an understanding, usually with an understanding that market conditions can change. So if it goes up, I'm okay with that, or the seller, you're okay with that. If it goes down, I'm okay with that, right? And then I'll eat that cost, right? But if everything, totally goes upside down and now, it changes your entire financial situation, those are discussions that now has to be addressed at the time of and new negotiations. So say, what can we work out? You know what I mean? Yeah.
I have another question
Yeah.
related to pre-construction. So if you have the right to lease during occupancy,
Yes.
and you have a tenant in there and they notify you of closing, but your lease agreement with the tenant takes them beyond the closing date, how does that work?
Okay, so your question is if I have a tenant, but then I'm closing
Yeah.
while my
and then-
tenant is still there.
Yes.
Okay, so there's a few things that happens there. If you would essentially still have the tenant there because it's still in the 1 year lease, right? So you would still close, but the tenant is still paying their rent because they're paying the rent to you. Now, if it's a condominium, you do have occupancy fees.
Yes.
So what that means is the building is not quite finished yet, but it's safe enough to live in. And then developer will charge you a fee to essentially, it's like a rent that doesn't pay down your mortgage, and it's to essentially cover all the costs, right? So once you close, the tenant is still there, you no longer have to pay the developer. You now go and get your mortgage, and you service your mortgage. So the rent that you collected now services that mortgage.
Right, so then when I close, does that become closing as an investor or as my,
Yes. So
right? Because if I have a tenant in there, because I couldn't live in that unit until until it closed for whatever reason, right? So I didn't want to pay the carrying cost of occupancy,
correct.
right? But the goal was to move into that unit,
Okay.
but they didn't give, I think they usually give 15 days, 10 days notice for closing
Right.
in those projects. So so my tenant is in there, but I was essentially supposed to move there.
So as soon as you have a tenant in there,
It's
and this is
not-
one of the reasons why you have a right to lease, because the developer when you sign an agreement, the developer wants to know if you are going to be using it for your use or if it's an investment. And the reason why is because if you do not take possession of it, you have to pay HST on that, because you're now an investor, and the government essentially thinks you're going to be making money, so they want a piece of that, right? So you have to pay HST. And the developer wants to know this because they do get the rebate if you're taking possession of it. If you're not taking possession of it, then that HST becomes your responsibility, right? So once you're renting it, you automatically get put into that category that you're an investor, and you have to pay that HST. However, you can still apply after you close to receive the HST rebate. Not after you close, but yeah, after you close, right? Yeah, the rental rebate, yeah. So you can apply for that and get it back.
I got a question. Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Your rebate that you just spoke about for the builder, is that something that is then applied to the purchase price?
So that's separate from the purchase price. Yeah.
So the lease to own, right? On the flip side, why would the owner want to go ahead and do that? Like sell it?
That's also a good question. So you would see a seller wanting to go into a lease to own in climates like this, because it's also one of the reasons why the first slide the second slide that I had there, where even though we had 10 increases in a year and 3 months, you still see prices. June and July it was higher than the previous 3 months, but it's still pretty resilient. And it's because sellers, they're holding on because they want to get their price. They don't want to just give away when they sell the property, they want to just give it away. So if they're unable to sell the property for the price that they want, they're more open to hold it, and they're more willing to work with people who are willing to take it. So I'll be more patient, because I know that at the end of the day, you're going to buy and own this property at the negotiated price that we discussed, but I just have to wait a few years to get that money from you.
So essentially, they'd be wanting to exit that property anyway.
They want to exit
So
that property.
so that's just another way of exit.
Correct. So when the market is strong and the market is hot, you don't generally see rental homes, because why? I want to get my money now, so why would I want to do a rental home or at least a home? But you are seeing more and more corporations setting up these programs, right? Setting up these programs to help the housing market and supply. So more corporations, that's what they do. They just have these programs in place when they want to sell out. It's just to essentially help the people get into home ownership, and also there may be some incentives from the government as well for them to be able to do that. Yes.
So if I wanted to get into the reconstruction, how do I know what? I want to choose the good development, right? So like I was having how do I choose, or like do you have like a place where you could find out, like get information on what kind of is there like a marketplace where you have like this developers were, and how can I get information on which developers probably go with, what to choose, basically based on the construction side.
Well, that's another great question. That's when you have Folu, right? And I will help you with that. But I mean, you can decide to that if an agent is representing to purchase something, it doesn't cost you anything. So you may as well go with someone that has the relationships as well as the knowledge of pre-construction, because you want to essentially navigate this safely, because you make one wrong move and it could be financially devastating, right? So you can do the research on your own if you like. So for example, let's say you're driving, you see the name of a builder or developer on one of those sites. You can just Google, go to their website, read about their history, how long they've been in the game, how long they've been doing this, what kind of projects have they done, and how many have come to completion. And there's also a database where you can find information on builders and see how many complaints they've had from from end users. There is in Ontario a insurance body called Terion that protects buyers in pre-construction and essentially covers you from the first year, everything within the inside the unit, and then the second year is just mechanical, and then you have 7 years on structural things, right? So whenever you make a claim or if there's any negative reviews about the developer, it's usually stated there, as well as if they've canceled any projects, right? So you can research this as well on the internet, or you can work with someone that has information. Because I would only work, because I've already vetted or I've worked with certain developers in the past and I haven't been disappointed, because I know who is their financial backer. For example, let's say it's a pension fund, right? So I know if they have a pension fund, they're going to finish the project because they manage billions and trillions of dollars, right? So those are the kind of things that allows me to pick the developers that I work with, and also when am I getting access to this? Because sometimes, it's not a hard and fast rule, right? Because sometimes if you're unable to get in this phase here, which is ideal, and let's say you get in somewhere here, it could still be beneficial to you. And the reason why is because in a climate like this, where interest rates are high, sales are slow, so these developers, I mean, they need to get things going. They need the funds, they need the financing. So they're willing to provide incentives. So maybe they require 20% before, but maybe now they're saying, okay, you know what, just bring 5%, and then when you finish, you can pay like another 5%, making it 10%. But before I do that, I'll talk to Chris. I'm like, hey, Chris, will I be able to qualify for 10% down, right? And then if he says yes, you'll be able to qualify for 10% down, even though that would be like a high ratio mortgage now, I'll be paying a little bit more. But at least I don't have to put more of my capital into it, right?
Just on that, like let's say yes, 5% now, 5% in the future. But what if things change? Does that rate change? Like, what's the approach if things change, like if down changes or price comes up?
Okay, so once I sign an agreement of a certain price, I pay the down payment based on that price, right? And it's already locked in. So as they go through the process, like if they increase the price, they don't increase the price on it because I already have an agreement of a certain price, right? So that's actually good for you, right? If they start, that's what you want to see. I want them to keep increasing prices after I've already bought my unit, because then it allows me, because that's now the new market rent, right? The market price, right? Because if I buy it for $550 and increase it to $650, I know I have $100,000, give or take, equity in that purchase. So that makes me comfortable, because if anything happens in the economy, and this guy that bought at $650, if he needs to exit or he needs to do a fire sale, he doesn't want to rent himself either. He may say, okay, you know what? Maybe I assign it before it's completed at cost at $650, right? And then plus closing costs, maybe now he's all in for it at $630, right? So he lost $20,000, but I still gained.
But the down payment stays the same.
The down payment stays the same. Yeah.
So based on the number of years you've had, like, how often do things get offered within the first 2 zones?
There's a good handful of times, and the reason why is because I've also built close relationship with developers that I trust, right? Because it's not every single developer that you necessarily need to work with, right? Because I identify certain areas, for example, ones that maybe it's going through a massive change, right? So I built relationship with people in that area, and based on my relationship with them, I may not be a family member or maybe a friend, but because it worked with me in the past, we're willing to say, hey, we've worked with you in the past, so we're willing to give you invite you to an exclusive launch, a broker launch. That's not open to everybody, so maybe I'll get access to here, right? Because when you get access to here, you're essentially very in a close circle.
Can I add something to that?
Absolutely.
So I've been talking to some developers, and I'm trying to get some money from investments as well as mortgages. So you'd be surprised how small the developer world is, and a lot of them know each other. And when things go wrong, they know. And they also have to provide basically a portfolio or a resume of projects that they've done in the past. So a lot of the times, what happens is that he will have access to it too. And he can just sit there and be like, okay, what are the canceled projects? What are the ones that you completed? And he gets a full package to get the sense of what's going on with that particular developer. It's going to be very easy to tell who's newer in the game and who's a veteran and who's actually going to come through for the projects. So it's a small world. I'm sure it's very easy for you to get a hold of some of these developers and get access to those.
And just to piggyback on what you said, I tend to stay away from developers that are ticket, to be honest, right? Because again, developers are essentially taking the majority of risk, right? When it comes to pre-construction, anything can happen, especially when it comes to, there's so many moving parts. You have trades, people that are going to be working there, and if they go on strike, that development just got held up for maybe a few months. And the banks are still there asking for their interest on their loans, right? So when it comes to a newer developer, I tend to not put clients in there. I may, based on talking to building a relationship, I may go in there myself, right? And if they perform and I'm happy with it, then I can bring it to my clients, right? Say, you know what, I've worked with them before. This is what they're able to do. This is who is financing them. This is who is backing them financially because they trust in them, and then I can feel confident to bring clients to them, right? Any more questions? All right. Well, thank you very much. Oh,
By the way, for the Zoom, somebody was asking if you bring that camera closer, or if not, maybe I can put me as opposed over here.
Yeah, that's because it's very close. So yeah, honestly. Yeah, I can put it in. That's fine. Sorry.
All right, Yemi.
Yes.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Yemi Asalu. I'm a partner at Corman & Company, which is a boutique law firm. We specialize in real estate, residential and commercial real estate. Main office is in Toronto. We've got an office in Ottawa. We serve clients province-wide. We've got 15 lawyers. We've got law clerks. We've got admin staff. We've got over 50 staff members. We've got articling student who's sitting here as well, Dario. So we've got a whole range of people, diverse diverse background, so there's always someone there that you can relate to, and overall, we're very friendly, we're very client friendly, as opposed to a lot of firms that are very cold, and you can't be afraid to pick up the phone and call us, and I think that's a major part of our culture that we've kept over the years. So that's who we are. Now, buying a home could be one of the most exciting things, one of the happiest things you could do. On the flip side, it could be a total nightmare if you don't do your homework. So that's why we're here, just so you can learn everything that you need to know, basically. You're going to be learning a lot, but I don't expect you to walk out of here an expert at buying a home unless you've bought a home in the past. But at least now you know what to look for. Now you know the questions to ask, and you know the people to direct your questions to. So that's what this is about. Now, feel free to stop me and ask a question as we go along the way, only because I don't necessarily have like a Q&A segment at the end. And I think while you've got that chain of thought, just bring it up. We can talk about it and then move on to the next thing. So, okay, so first things first. You've decided to buy a home. Question is, how do you wish to buy that home? Do you wish to buy personally as an individual, in which case you're interested in 123 Main Street? Are you buying it in your personal name, or are you buying it under a corporate entity? Now, there are many vehicles through which you could own a home. It could be a trust, could be personal, could be corporate. Those are the three main or three most common forms. But if I was to narrow it down even further, two most common forms. If you're buying your personal home, chances are you take it under your personal name. We had that conversation earlier. It makes sense to, number one, because from a financing standpoint, the expectation is that you'd be qualifying based on your personal credit, based on your income and things like that. The other thing there, which I'll talk about later, would be the tax advantage in actually owning your personal home, which I expect would also be your principal residence. So that's the advantage there. So these are two things you're considering. Depending on where the money is coming from as well. So if the money sits with a corporation, then you might want to consider the corporation being the purchaser, technically speaking, because the money belongs to the corp. But for the most part, people will take as individuals. So which kind of segues into the next topic or subtopic, which is, now that you've decided to buy, in what capacity do you want to take title? So if you're buying as an individual, a solo individual, the second part won't really matter because it's just you and then that's it. But if you're buying with a second person, say with a spouse, partner, friend, family member, the question then becomes, are you going to take as joint tenants or as tenants in common? The difference between the two, the main difference between the two is survivorship. What do I mean by survivorship? If two people buy a home and one person passes away, what happens to the interest of the person that passes away? What happens to the surviving person? Under the first option, joint tenancy, interest automatically goes to the surviving person without need for a will. A will is a slightly separate conversation, but it's kind of still related to home ownership. So if you're married, I would expect that you want your property to pass on to your spouse. So without need for a will, it will automatically happen. If you're buying property with somebody else, maybe a family member, maybe a friend, especially if you're buying with a co-investor, you definitely don't want to take as joint tenants, because if something happened to you, you don't want your interest passing to a business partner. You want it going to your estate, and then your estate can deal with whoever it is that your will says to give it to, or whatever the law says, or whoever rather the law says to give it to if you pass away without a will. With tenancy in common, again, survivorship, but the difference is you get to split your interest. While with joint tenancy, we're talking about an undivided 100%. So if you've got 2 people on title, if you've got 5 people on title, and you take as joint tenants, you all own 100% undivided. So 5 people won't make it equal shares of 20% each. No, you have an undivided 100%. With tenancy in common, you can actually separate the ownership. So if 2 people bought property, you could do 50-50, 60-40, 90-10, whatever fractions. But what happens in that situation is I own 90% and Cynthia owns 10%. My 90% is my 90%, Cynthia's 10 is her 10. If anything were to happen to me, my 10% goes to whoever I want it to go to. Whoever it goes to now becomes the quote unquote co-owner, if you will, with Cynthia. I could sell off my 90% to Folu, for example, and I wouldn't need to necessarily get Cynthia's approval to do that. Of course, without digging deeper, if we've got a mortgage on that property, the mortgage won't necessarily recognize the 90%, 10%. On the mortgage, we're joint and several. So, like Chris can confirm, the bank's going to come after both of us. They're not going to come after me for 90%, Cynthia for 10%. They will come after both of us for 100%, or either one of us, whoever they can get the money from, right? So that's the difference there. So depending on who you're buying with, would determine, and the intention will determine which of these 2 options you will go with. Type of property, pre-construction, Folu's spoken about that quite a bit. But there's a difference between buying pre-construction property and buying resale. Now, when you look at the nuances, when you purchase a resale property, which is a property that already exists, which is a property that's already owned by somebody else, there are less factors to consider. So you basically are looking at the purchase price. For the most part, it's really just the purchase price, and then that's it. But with pre-construction deals, the difference is if the agreement of purchase and sale says the property is $1 million, you're not actually paying just $1 million. When you read the contract itself, they're adding on different other costs. So development charges, utility hookup, installation, potential HST rebate, all of those things. So what utility, development levies first. When a builder puts up property, they also pay the municipality development charges. Those charges are passed on to you as a buyer. Some builders would include development charges in the agreement purchase price, so you don't even get to know that those charges are there. So if the purchase price is $1 million, and let's say, for example, the builder paid $20,000 in development charges allocated to your unit, you might not realize that the $1 million price tag includes the development charge. What the builder would do in that case is basically write into the contract a provision that allows the builder to charge more if the municipality, which is the city, ends up charging the builder more in development charge, because that happens as well. It could be because the developer changed plans. It could be because the city came up with something and all of a sudden they sent the builder a bill for $5,000. So what the builder thought was $20,000 is now $25,000. So you're paying $5,000 more on the $1 million purchase price. Then you've got builders who wouldn't include the $20,000 in the $1 million purchase price, and they'd add it on when you're closing. So you sign a purchase agreement, it's for $1 million. You're excited, you're happy, you run to Chris, you get your mortgage approval. Then come the closing day, you get my numbers, and you're like, I hate this lawyer. Like, what's this lawyer talking about? Where am I supposed to get this money? All that, you know, all that stuff. So, but it's too late at that point because the deal's gone firm, right? So knowledge of it is very key because you need to know what to budget for. And that's the stark difference between a pre-construction deal and a resale. With a resale, you're mostly dealing with the purchase price, the deposit, and an adjustment for property taxes. Property taxes you have no control over. Property taxes are property taxes. So the only difference is how much of, we prorate property taxes over the course of a year. So it all boils down to how much has been paid by the seller, and we do a prorating so that the seller's responsible for their share. So let's say you're closing on June 30th of whatever year. The seller's responsible from January 1st to June 29. You're responsible from June 30th onward. So you kind of just prorate it, so you're responsible only for what you owe. Right? So it's a lot simpler with a resale in that sense. Now, HST rebate. Folu mentioned that a bit earlier. Very key, very important, because we're talking about a $24,000 price tag for the most part. And I say $24,000 because once your purchase price exceeds $450,000, what you're getting in an HST rebate is actually $24,000. So I'll go back to my $1 million purchase price example. There's an assumption when you sign a purchase agreement that you will be moving in, that you are an end user. In that scenario, the builder gets to claim the $24,000 HST rebate from CRA, which means if you actually move into the property, you don't have to pay the $24,000. It's assumed that you qualify for the HST rebate. So basically, your $1 million purchase price includes some HST, but it excludes some HST as well. That excluded HST is what we call the HST rebate, which once your purchase price exceeds $450,000 would be $24,000. So I'll keep referring to $24,000 because I don't know where you're going to find anything under $450,000, to be honest. So let's be realistic. $24,000. So imagine if you went ahead and bought one of these pre-construction properties, but your plan was not to move in, right? So you buy it, you think, okay, it's all fine, this and this and that. Before closing, you tell me, actually, before closing, the builder would reach out asking whether or not you plan to move in. This is before, there's so many angles to this thing, I'm just trying to keep it as simple as possible. Builder reaches out, finds out you're not actually moving in, all of a sudden you have to pay an extra $24,000. That could be a lot of money for some people to come up with. So it's important to know from the very get-go, you can't avoid it, you have to pay it. If you plan on renting out the property, just factor it into your budget. It's money that you get back anyway. Because if it's owner-occupied, you never have to pay it. But if it's not owner-occupied, you pay on closing, and then you apply after closing with a 1-year lease to get it back. So for the HST rebate, there's the owner-occupied option, there's the rental rebate option. Owner-occupied option, you never have to pay, doesn't have to factor into your budget. the rental option, you have to pay it first and then get it back. Rhea asked a very, very good question earlier on. And this is a scenario that's in between the two that I've just explained to you. So what Rhea's question was, correct me if I'm wrong. She said, what if, okay, so just so that this makes sense. When you buy a pre-construction condo, there are two closings. There's what we call the interim closing, when the property is ready to be moved into, but hasn't been registered as a condo, right? So the condominium entity does not exist at that point, but physically, you can move in. It might not be perfect looking, or it could be perfect looking, but the point is, it's not registered as a condo at that point. So you move in for a couple of months usually, on average 8 to 12, I would say, and then you pay what we call occupancy fees, which is like a phantom mortgage or like rent, but either way, doesn't go towards paying down your purchase price. It doesn't go towards your deposit or anything like that. So you move in, or you take occupancy, that goes on for a couple of months. What Rhea was saying was that if she rented out the property during occupancy, what happens, so you get a tenant, you sign a 1-year lease, occupancy ends up going on for only 8 months, which means come closing, you still have a tenant on a 1-year lease. So what happens there? Well, you have to honor the 1-year lease to the end of the term before you can actually move in, unless you pay the tenant out. The point I'm trying to make from that scenario is there are two recognizable scenarios: owner-occupied or rental. There's no midway. There's no, oh, it was a tenant first, then I moved in. Or, oh, I moved in first and I changed my mind, now I've put in a tenant. If you do that, you risk losing the rebate altogether. Because again, CRA only recognizes one or the other. So in Rhea's example, I would just apply for the rental rebate and just call it a day. I wouldn't even bring up the fact that I moved in or anything like that, because if you do, what they'll tell you is it owner occupied or is it a rental? And you get the rental only if the tenant was the first occupant. You get the owner occupied rebate only if the owner was the first occupant. There's no such thing as somebody else moved in and moved out. Even if it's for like a month, once you say somebody else moved in for any period of time, you lose your right to that rebate. So it's very important to keep that in mind. Right? But it all boils down to the $24,000.
Quick question. So on the list price, the purchase price,
Yes.
are you paying HST to a maximum of 24,000? Because the 13% on $1 million.
So it's technically not 13% on $1 million.
Okay.
That $1 million already includes some HST,
Okay.
but excludes some HST. So the excluded portion is the $24,000. So it's kind of like a convoluted way
Okay,
of
so
doing it.
no matter the list price, as long as it's over 450,
Right.
it's 24,000,
Correct.
or it's an amount up to a maximum of 24. Because
It could be more than 24.
Oh.
So the way the HST rebate works is the lower your purchase price, the more you get back. So the whole idea is at 450, you're considered rich enough to not be entitled to a rebate. But this was 450 of what, 19, whatever.
so no, so if
that's why,
you're
you know.
by chance you purchase the property under 450,
Right.
and it's bought as an investment, at closing you won't have to pay that HST.
You still have to pay. You only just at closing, there's no escaping. The only way to escape paying on closing is if you're moving.
Okay.
That's the only way. Yeah. So that of course is that occupancy, interim occupancy. So I don't know why this reads like occupancy rescission, two different things. interim occupancy is what I explained earlier with pre-construction condos, where you take possession of the property and then you live in there for some time until final closing. If most purchase agreements would prohibit you from renting out the property during interim occupancy. If your plan is to rent out the property you purchase as an investment, what you want to make sure is that you get the right to rent out during occupancy. Because if you don't, what happens is you end up paying occupancy fees, and occupancy fees could be a lot of money, especially right now with interest rates as high as they are. You could be paying thousands in occupancy fees. So imagine occupancy going on for 8 months where you can't even rent out the property, but you're paying out all this money. That's not good for for your investment book. So you want to make sure you get the right to rent during occupancy. There's a rescission period. When you buy pre-construction property, condos specifically, by law, and the law is called the Condominium Act, you have 10 days to review the purchase agreement, which we call a cooling off period, and then you could decide at that point to not proceed or to negotiate the terms of the agreement with the builder. If you don't, it goes firm after 10 days. So all of these development charges, HST rebate, all this stuff I'm talking about, or being able to rent during occupancy, or like Folu mentioned earlier, assigning the agreement, right? Assigning the agreement means before the closing date, as you know, these things take forever to build sometimes, 4 years, 5 years. Life happens, things change. People buy single, by the time the project is done, they've got kids or they're married, and all of a sudden that one-bedroom condo is no longer practical. You want the option to be able to sell it off without actually closing it, which is called an assignment. So getting an assignment, being able to lease during occupancy, capping the development charges, all those municipal charges, utility meter hookups, all those extra costs that are added onto your purchase price, being able to cap them, you get to do during the rescission period. And that rescission period is a 10-day period. Right? So which is why when you sign an agreement and they tell you, no, it's just standard stuff, it's not just standard stuff. Get it to your lawyer, let your lawyer take a look, and save yourself a lot of grief. Because trust me, if you don't do that, it goes firm, you're bound. You're bound by those two.
When you say capping, what does it mean? Like, do you choose the rates that you want, or?
So it's not capping in terms of a rate, it's more so capping in terms of the dollar amount. Oftentimes, the development costs, the additional development costs aren't known. So when you review the purchase agreement, they just tell you, okay, on closing, we're going to be charging you additionally for development charges or development charges itself. We're going to be charging you for utility hookup. That's like the hydro meter, water meter, all of the costs of getting all those hooked up. Sometimes they tell you what it might cost. If it's going to be an increase in development charges, they won't even tell you. So by capping it, what you're saying is, all of these other costs that you're listing, I'm not willing to pay more than an extra $20,000 for. So that way you can budget appropriately. Because otherwise, if you give them a blank card, they could come back and charge you $50,000 for what you could have gotten capped, maybe at 20.
So you're able to do that?
You're able to negotiate it. They're not bound to agree, but you're able to negotiate, and that's the whole point of making sure that the agreement gets reviewed during the rescission period. The type of property that you purchase, that could also determine how you proceed. So if you're buying a condo versus when you're buying a freehold property, for example. So if you're buying a condo, your purchase agreement, and here we're looking at a resale scenario, your purchase agreement would typically include provision to review what we call the status certificate. The status certificate basically gives you a snapshot of what's going on with the condo. Right? It tells you what the condo fees are, called common element fees. It tells you if the condo is involved in a lawsuit. It tells you if the special assessment has been levied. The special assessment is basically when a condo doesn't have enough money in their reserve to cover repair work and replacement work to the property, then they come after you as the owners to pay that, to cover that expense. So you want to make sure that this condo isn't in bad shape. We take a look at the financials. Again, legal. You get to read the condo rules. You get to read the condo rules because a condo might not allow you to have pets, and you've got a favorite pet, right? If you went ahead and bought the property closed without reviewing all of the condo rules and everything else that comes with the status certificate, and you move in, not realizing it, one day you're in the elevator, somebody smiles at you, sheepishly, you don't know why, and then you get a call or a letter from the condo saying that, you have to get rid of your pet. Like, what do? Do you sell your condo units? Do you, So, again, when you get to review stuff like this, you save yourself a lot of trouble. And it has to be reviewed properly. I've heard that some lawyers would review the status certificate and review only there's a document called a Form 13, which is like a 3-4 page document, and that's the status certificate itself, but it comes with a bunch of other documents. I've heard of people just proceed to waive that status certificate review by reviewing just those 4 pages, because the other pages are huge and they're small print and nobody really wants to read those things, but you have to. It's just one of those things. You have to, right? So make sure that you do that. And again, I'll jump back to this for a bit. Even with pre-construction deals, right? It doesn't stop at the purchase agreement. There's a disclosure document that goes with the purchase agreement that breaks down a lot of things. It tells you about the project. It tells you about how many units the project is intended to have. It gives you a lot of information. It also gives you the proposed rules for the condo. So if you're excited about buying pre-construction property, and that's going to be your next Airbnb property, either in the pre-construction scenario or in the resale scenario, only to find out that you're not allowed to do Airbnb, what do you then do, right? So when you look at these things, you're better prepared, and that's the whole essence of getting those looked at. With a freehold resale property, there's not really a lot more that you need to do before firming up, besides the obvious, home inspection, financing condition, things like that, which your real estate agent, Folu, would navigate with you. Chris would also navigate the financing condition part as well. Financing, well, Chris has talked about this extensively. So again, there are all sorts of financing options. This is where we'd all rather be, but that's not going to happen for most people. So if you've got your cash, there are no restrictions. You negotiate your purchase price, you buy, everybody smiles, nothing to worry about. But most of us fall in this category here. Chris showed you how you could progress from A lender, which is mostly bank lenders, to alternative lenders, the B lenders, and the private lenders. Again, the strictest being the A lenders, being the banks, and they can be strict because they've got money. RBC would never think that you're doing them a favor by approaching them for a mortgage. That's the reality. They've got deep pockets, they've got lots of clients. But a lot of the time, people would start with the A lender and maybe end up with a private lender. I think someone asked the question, who's a private lender? Private lender really is anybody. Cynthia might have extra money. Cynthia might have 500,000 sitting in her account, and her bank's only paying her what, like 1%, 1 point something percent on $500,000 that Cynthia's worked really hard for. And Cynthia then calls me and says, Yemi, do you have a client? Keep me in mind when you have a client who needs money, right? Then I have a client who never looked at a pre-construction agreement. We're signing, and they're like, I'm paying $50,000 more. Yeah, because the HS rebate is this, that. Like, I didn't know this. Where am I supposed to find the money from? Well, give you the option. If you don't have money, I'll call Cynthia. I'll be like, hey, Cynthia, I've got somebody who's looking for $50,000. Is your money still available, right? And Cynthia would tell me, yeah, I'm willing to do it. I'll charge 10%. I'll charge 12%. You know, lender fee, this and this and that. So that's how those kind of connect, right? Cynthia's terms would be less stringent than RBC's. RBC wants to see a perfect credit score. They want to see, you know, like income, the regular income, like a T4, all the standard things that people in modern day really don't have. There's so many employment arrangements today that, you know, those don't necessarily fit that mold. So wherever you find yourself, from A lender to private lender, B lenders generally have a lot more stipulations in their mortgage. They tend to go, you're not allowed to have secondary finance. And if you're wondering what that means, it means that in addition to getting a mortgage from that B lender, you could be getting money from another source, right? So when we register the mortgage on title, they're registered in priority order. So there could be whoever is registered first is in first position, then second position, and things like that. Many B lenders would explicitly, and I say explicitly because some A lenders don't want it either, but they're not as explicit about it. The B lenders would have you sign something with me, a declaration, a sworn document confirming that you're not taking out a second mortgage, confirming that you're planning to occupy the property. You know, they tend to have all the stipulations. There are B lenders that will never allow you to sign under power of attorney. So if you had to travel or be out of the country, and then you leave a power of attorney for somebody to sign on your behalf, it's not going to happen. Your deal is going to fall apart. Or you're going to jump on a plane and get back just to close that deal. Signing remotely, which is a lot more common now since the pandemic. There are B lenders that will not allow you to sign remotely. You have to go physically into the lawyer's office, and if you happen to be out of the country, well, again, you're jumping on that plane, you have to come back.
I actually heard some lawyers, if they have access to the technology, you can sign remotely. So you sign on your computer, you sign on your iPad, and they have a machine that copies, that does the ink signature. And that's something that apparently has almost like a loophole.
This is the thing, it's always a moving target.
Yeah.
So we do the same thing, what you described.
Yeah.
We never, well, maybe for the first 2 weeks during the pandemic, but we attended a practice advisory session and we brainstormed with a bunch of other lawyers. We brainstormed the different ways that things could go wrong. Mm-hmm. And one of the things we came up with was that clients would have to draw their signature on each signing page. So you know how you use DocuSign, and then they've got all this pre-populated tap, 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 and you sign like 50 documents in 50 seconds. No, we're like, no, that's not going to work, because what it might suggest in the future is that the client never actually read those things. Mm-hmm. So the system we use in my office is you actually draw your signature and sign each signing page as we explained it to you.
Yeah.
Now, I'm sure some lenders caught on to what you described, because now you need to see how they describe their mortgage instructions to me. Client has to be physically present with the lawyer in Canada. So they hear these things, they know these things, and they keep setting more strict, like more clearer rules as to the fact that no, we want wet ink. And when you want wet ink, that means you need to have an original. You know what? Some lawyers take risks. That's the reality where we're all professionals, but everyone's risk threshold is different. They might get away with it, but if you were to get audited, I'm not going to lose sleep because of an audit. You know, I'm going to sit eye to eye with the auditor and no fear. Right? So I'm sure it happens still.
For sure.
So yeah, all these stipulations, be lenders. You don't want to be a lender, but again, that's life. Sometimes you have to get it. You might pay a little bit more. Lender fee, of course, broker fee. Fees come in, but it's a whole lot better than being in default under the agreement. You lose a lot more. You lose your deposit. They could come after you for damages, all those things. So it's really nothing is bad. You just have to weigh against your option. Land transfer tax. That's what LTT stands for. Land transfer tax is paid on every property purchased in the province of Ontario. Other provinces have it too, but now we're zeroing in on Ontario. If your property happens to be in Toronto, you also pay a City of Toronto land transfer tax. So, just the other side of steals, you buy the same property, you're actually looking at each other. One person pays a municipal land transfer tax, the other person doesn't. So that's the difference there. But these form part of your closing costs. Land transfer tax isn't a single rate. It's a graduating rate. So like from up to $50,000, $55,000 is 0.5%. 55 to 250 is 1%. 250 to 400, 1.5. It just goes up like that. So it's not one rate on your entire purchase price, right? It's just that price gap or price difference all the way up to your total purchase price. I brought it up here because if you're a first-time buyer, well, important because of the closing cost, but if you're a first-time buyer, a first-time buyer means you haven't owned property anywhere in the world. I get a lot of clients who would be like, first-time buyer. This is the first time in Canada. I've heard that. No, if you've owned anywhere in the world, you're not considered a first-time buyer. There are a lot of people that have bought property with other people without necessarily having any real interest. So maybe they were a co-signer, they had to come on to help somebody out, but they had no real interest in the property. You're not a first-time buyer. What I've done in cases like that is I've closed on the assumption that they're not on the fact that they're not first-time buyers, but had them apply to the Ministry of Finance to try to get a refund by proving that they actually were just trustees on title to help somebody else out, not that they had actual interest in the property. So, ways to get around it. What you get from the province is a maximum of $4,000. So regardless what you're paying in land transfer taxes, you get $4,000. With the City of Toronto, you get $4,475. So this kind of helps you plan. Of course, the conditions to getting the refund or the rebate, if you will. If it's a rental property, you're not going to get the land transfer tax refund. You have to move into the property as your primary place of residence within 9 months of the closing date. So if you're buying your first home and it's an investment, then forget trying to get a refund altogether.
What happens if you go into with two people? One is a first-time home buyer and the other person is not.
Okay, good question. It gets prorated. So if you're going in with somebody else, so let's keep it simple. Let's say you're going in with one other person and you're going in as joint tenants. Remember my other example. You get 50% of the rebate. So $4,000, you get $2,000. But it also depends on who that second person is. Because if you're married, if you're common law and you've been together for a straight 3 years, or if you've not been together for 3 years, if you have a child between yourselves, if one person is not a first-time buyer, it disqualifies the first-time buyer. It's weird, but that's what the rule is. So it depends on who this second person is. Could make all the difference. Or if you decided to take as tenants in common, remember that's when you get to split 50-50, 90-10, or whatever the case is. You get, if the first-time home buyer is the holder of 90%, you qualify for 90% of $4,000. So the more you allocate to the first-time buyer, the more they get back in the land transfer tax refund. So that's how that plays out. And people do it all the time. Like if you're bringing on someone to help on a mortgage and that person is forced to go on title, they would do like a 99%, 1%, just to try to maximize the first-time buyer exemption. So that's what happened there. Residency, very important, especially in the last couple of years. So if you're a foreigner, and then being a foreigner is, of course, depends on how they define it. But if you're not Canadian citizen, you're not a Canadian PR card holder, you're not a protected person, and you're not a provincial nominee, if you're able to buy property, residential property in Ontario, you pay the NRST, commonly referred to as the foreign buyer tax. This tax is 25% of the purchase price. So it's a lot of money to pay. Now, there are different levels affecting home ownership and your residency. More recently is the federal ban on foreign buyers, right? So if you're a foreign buyer, you're not even able to buy, period. But let's say you fall under one of the exemptions and you're actually able to buy because you've got a work permit, or you're able to buy because you've got a student permit, then this will still apply. This is 25%. That's huge. You know, that would put a big dent in your budget. But if you then became a permanent resident within 4 years of closing, you get that money back, you get a refund. So there's hope, but it's a lot of money to come up with first. The prohibition that's on effective 1st of January 2023, so we're more than halfway past the period, unless they extend it, of course. But it's a 2-year moratorium supposed to expire on December 31st of this year. So after that, foreign buyers should be able to buy. So we're looking forward to that. What I haven't written here, I haven't written it because it's being discussed now. The city of Toronto also coming up with their own foreign buyer tax. They're planning to implement it on the 1st of January 2025. So as soon as the foreign buyer ban goes away, the Toronto one comes in.
So that would be in addition to the 25%.
Correct, 35. If you're a foreigner and you're buying $1 million property, you're paying $1,350,000, which is insane. In my opinion.
That's just for Ontario.
That's combined Ontario and Toronto. So what the city estimates is, if the foreign buyer ban doesn't go away, they'll make about, they should generate about $10 million from the foreign buyer tax. If the ban goes away, they're expecting to make about 15 million. So it's all about trying to meet their budget. Everybody wants money. They're looking to get it from all different avenues. The intention in purchasing the property, this is kind of tied to things that we discussed earlier. Is it going to be your primary place of residence? Or is it going to be an investment property? So again, whichever option it is, depending on the property type you're buying, that could influence what mortgage rate you get. It's different if you're buying a primary residence. It's more expensive if you're buying investment property. Your down payment requirement is different if you're buying investment property versus if you're buying your primary residence. So that you have to put into consideration.
So about the land transfer tax, you mentioned about 0.5% on like the first meeting. So like, is it an accumulative to the purchase amount, or?
Yeah. So it goes up like that all the way to the purchase price. So it's not. So let's say your purchase price is $400,000, and at $400,000 you're paying 2%. Let's say. It doesn't mean you're paying 2% on $400,000. You're going to pay 0.5% on the first, 55,000, 1% on the portion between 55 and 250. So it goes up and up and back. Kind of similar to the explanation with the down payment, right? Where it's 5% on the first 500,000 and 10% on the. It's just 10% on the portion of the mortgage in excess of 500,000. So kind of like same idea. Okay, alternative arrangements. I'll run through this real quick. You won't always have a case where it's just one person going in to buy. You might be buying with a friend, buying with a co-investor. You want to protect yourselves in these scenarios so that you don't end up in court, even though you could still end up in court. But at least you have an agreement to tender when you go to court. It won't be a case of, oh, we just bought property together. Now this guy is trying to take our money, and you get into a fight. When you have a partnership agreement, it spells out the terms of the relationship. The relationship being ownership of the property. The parties to the purchase agreement may all be registered on title as well, or not. So for example, if myself, Ray, and Coy, three of us bought property together, but I don't go on title, only both of you do, I'd have to take steps to make sure that my interest is protected. Why? Because you both could decide to sell off the property while I'm enjoying myself somewhere, thinking the property still exists, and then it's gone, right? Or you might decide to sell the property. I might want a different sale price from you, and we would get into a fight about, okay, no, we're not accepting this offer, and that, this and that. So the partnership agreement would deal with things like that. It would basically protect my interest by identifying me as someone who's got interest in the property. There's also a trust agreement, which I'll kind of like along the same line, but I'll talk about that shortly. It talks about down payment and the partnership agreement. So for example, if two or more people buy property and the down payment aren't necessarily equal, right? You have two people buying, down payment is in 50-50, one person put a lot more than the other. That's a very common thing. You'd want to protect your down payment, because even though you own the property equally, or you decided to own it equally going forward, the fact that I put more money is only fair that I get what I put in first before we split the remainder. So if you've got $100,000 down payment, one person puts in $80,000, the other person puts in $20,000. What happens in the partnership agreement is it addresses the fact that when the property gets sold, you get your 20, you get your 80, and then the profit of $200,000 is then split 100 and 100. So that way it's equitable, it's fair to everybody. Who's responsible for what? Their costs to owning a property. It's property taxes, maintenance costs, insurance, of course, the mortgage. So all of that will be addressed in the partnership agreement. And of course, the profit and loss, what eventually happens, how that is distributed by. So somewhere along the way, you buy property, 3 years in, I have other needs and I wish to sell. My co-owner partner does not want to sell. What are our options? We address options for a buyer, right? The partner could buy me out, and then I go on my merry way. This would address how we come about the buyout. Right? We do an appraisal. You could have each person engage, could be a realtor to get a CMA, and then you could come up with the average of whatever values both realtors put forward. So just ways, just so it doesn't get into a big fight at the time, we address that in the partnership agreement. And then the bare trust agreement is basically where the person on title confirms to the world, basically by way of a document, that they're holding X interest in trust for somebody who's not on title. Because anyone who searches a property would see that, would only see the person who's registered. They have no idea what's going on behind that registration. That's what the bare trust agreement does, is basically to protect the non-titled person. But there's also a side to the bare trust agreement, which is an indemnity, which is basically where even the person on title has to be protected, because imagine if I went on title and somebody else couldn't because they couldn't get a mortgage, but we're supposed to both be responsible for the mortgage, which means every month you're supposed to transfer $2,000 to me. If you don't transfer the $2,000 to me and I'm not able to pay the mortgage, the bank is going to come after me. What's my recourse then, right? So I need to have an agreement where I can go after that person for whatever damages I suffer. So that's basically what the trust agreement is. And that's it. We've just talked real estate. It's kind of like running a relay race. If you're wondering why we're all here and doing this, it could be very complex and it could be very simple. So what we try to do is help you navigate this maze of real estate home purchase. We're all connected. There's an interconnectivity there that is very important to you as a purchaser. It's almost kind of like a relay race where somebody starts, you pass on the baton to the next person, and then there's the anchor, right? I come in at the tail, but unlike a relay race, I can't necessarily make up for what the other players in that, in that race haven't done. I can try, but it won't always work that way. So that's why when you've got your real estate agent, when you've got your mortgage broker, and when you've got your lawyer all working together, and there's this synergy, it saves you a lot of stress. Why? Because if something potentially goes wrong, I can pick up the phone and call Chris. I can pick up the phone and call Folu. Folu and Chris could call each other. We'll work things out very quickly. But when there's no connection between all of the parties you're working with, or the professionals you're working with, it makes it that much more difficult. So I think you're taking the right step in even attending this session, because you've learned a lot, I hope. Again, you don't have to remember it perfectly, you just have to remember the point. And you just need to know to ask the right questions. And that's, again, what this is all about. So thanks for coming. Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, everyone, thank you so much for coming. This is the Clear Trust offices, so I hope you guys really enjoyed it. Thank you guys online. Hopefully you guys got to enjoy a little bit of a show, but you guys should take a moment, thank yourselves for coming here on a Saturday, taking some time out of your weekend in order to learn something. We're here for you guys, we're here to help. Any questions? All right, please feel free, grab a drink, grab a coffee, grab a croissant, whatever, and enjoy yourselves.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Of course. The trust is if you put the property, and this is also for an initial tax arrangement, where you transfer the property, set up a family trust, right, which is one of the most common ones, where somebody puts all their property in the hands of a trust, so that if that person passes away, they're not paying all of this extra property tax. Or if they're trying to get the trust to cater to the family after they're gone in specific ways.
And I have your cards.
So maybe they don't want their
so
kid
who does, like,
ending up with all these things specifically, maybe until a certain
He's
age.
the first step.
So somebody has to get in that time.
This is because it's
Things like that.
you can't get
And
into
okay,
it.
so the question
So,
now is based on the market and what area would you
Maybe
say
I'm
want
not.
to, like,
Yeah, so I didn't have
because I know like the
Yeah.
cheapskates that the houses
Yeah.
of the sort.
What's the other? Yeah.
prices.
The trust one is less common
Yeah.
Because
it's but people that have a ton of wealth tend to do that trust arrangement. Wow.
Or are you okay with, like,
But no,
let's say,
what I wouldn't, let's say